says, getting back with an ex impair growth. A friend who is on the same spiritual journey says that she rarely will entertain an ex. Entertaining an ex anything promotes one's growth. It's most likely will slow, if not retard it. Is that true? I don't think that there's a one-size-fits-all answer to that question. I think it depends on the dynamics between those two people. Sometimes, you know, sometimes it's that something happened in the relationship and perhaps at that point in time, neither of you had the tools to be able to move through it together, but maybe you grow apart and then you discover things about yourself and now you gain the tools and maybe there's a broader perspective and then you come back together and all of a sudden you're able to see and communicate and be with one another in a way that is new and fresh and expansive. It's kind of like Esther Perel says, most people in the Western world will have 3 major relationships in their life. Sometimes they're with different people, sometimes they're with the same person. So my answer to that would be there's no one size fits all. It's really, I think, on a case-by-case basis. Now, there are instances where you may have an ex who, you know, doesn't do any of the work and hasn't really changed, and getting back with them may be a way for you to try to resolve something that's really more about clinging to an egoic attachment about that relationship and worthiness stuff and blah, blah, blah. But the only way to really know that is to have that be engaged and actively engaged with that inner dialogue. And also probably to know that by trying. You know, if it's something that you feel like you have to try and you need to try it in order to know, there's nothing wrong with that. There's no judgment or qualification of that. It may be that that's what is needed in order to continue to grow. There's an expression in psychodynamic theory, it's called regression in service of the ego, which is to say that every time you experience a sense of growth, anytime you experience a broader perspective on something, usually you will experience some form of regression, or you will feel as if you're taking one step back. And in psychodynamic theory, it's suggested that that is necessary in order for you to take those 3 steps forward. Because if you could imagine, let's say you have some point of contention, like there's some conflict, and it's a core conflict for you: fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, you know, or needing to be in control and not being able to let go of it, even if it means you sacrifice the quality of your relationships, things like that. And every time you have an experience that comes into conflict with that core thing, then it's like sort of like rotating around the sun. You achieve a certain circumference. Now, let's say then you encounter a planet or whatever, and usually it's another conflict which mirrors the core conflict a little bit, and then you gain new perspective. So now you have a wider circumference, and now you're even wider, circling around the same themes. And then so now from this wider perspective, not only can you still see the core conflict from a greater distance, which means you can see more of it. It also means that you can see that first ring, right? And you can also see the planets that were circling in that first ring. And you can see them all from a much broader perspective, which means that you will, on some level, revisit them. And you'll go back and you'll be like, well, now I understand this so much more than I did the first time around, because I've got this entirely in this big, broader perspective. Sometimes there's a feeling of frustration because you might think, oh, I haven't made any progress. But I would actually suggest that if you feel like I've taken a step backwards, it's probably a good sign that you've already gone 3 steps forward. So I hope that answers. So in a nutshell, I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all answer to that question, but I hope that illuminates some of that.